Hi, book club members. I'm Jen.
And I'm Carrie.
And this is Warhammer 40k Book Club, where we read from a crag. This is episode number 119, and our book is Da Big Dakka by Mike Brooks. It tells the continuing misadventures of Ufthak Blackhawk across the universe. We posted several questions on our website, WH40kbookclub.com, and we encourage participation in our conversations via YouTube, our site, or Encrypted Vox channel. Spoiler warning. If you haven't yet read this book, definitely check it out before listening to this post, as we'll be talking about it from start to finish in great detail. With that, let's dive right into the melee. As always, Carrie, did you like the book?
I did. It was good fun.
I really, really enjoyed this book. I was enjoying the book. I was like, oh, this is fun. And then I got to chapter 19. And the book, it made my cold black heart grow 3 sizes.
So what made me nearly spit out whatever I was drinking was on page 79 when the Grots were arguing over if the sky was white and gold or black and blue.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It's like leave it to Mike Brooks to bring in some random pop culture reference. If you don't know what that's referring to, there was, for whatever reason, a tizzy going over whether a dress was white and gold or black and blue. And depending upon lighting, honestly, what you see, the shadows, everybody saw different things.
Yes. And I loved that. I loved the fact that Daboffin was basically Gizmo Duck. And if, somehow Mike Brooks actually listens to this, do not ever disabuse me of that notion. It was Gizmo Duck. There were so many. He is really good at bringing in a lot of pop culture references into his narrative and just weaving them in so that you're like, I get it, but it doesn't ever feel heavy-handed or tacky, for lack of a better word.
No, I mean, I think he does just as good of a job as, Sandy Mitchell does, because Sandy Mitchell always pulls in one random pop culture thing, and it's always funny because it fits the situation. Like my favorite one so far, I think, was, I don't remember which book it is, but it's one of the books that's, pre Amberley Vale, where he's on this planet where he gets by accident. There's a bunch of orcs. And he's with like these prisoners who are like just trying to survive. And this one chick, she yells, "I got one. I got one." He goes, "That's great, kid. Don't get cocky." I'm like, you know what? Bravo. I'll allow that. It's just like this, they're arguing over this, what color the sky is. First of all, that's totally in the Orks idiom, or at least the Grots anyway. And then to bring in that random pop culture reference. Well done, sir. Well done.
I think I'm starting to feel like a lot of the authors have their groove, right? Like Chris Raitt is my favorite guy for like how the Imperium works, right? He has fallen into this groove of like, this is how the Imperium works. And more importantly, this is how Terra works. And this is like all these little flavored texts for how this universe operates, right? Mike Brooks is definitely becoming my preeminent authority on the Xenos races. He, especially with the Orks, and I know that I've talked about this before, and this goes into my what parts stood out to me, is that just the way that Ufthak thinks, his aversion to thinking, when he talks about how much his head hurts in the beginning because he's thinking, and he hates that he keeps thinking because he's getting bigger and he just can't help but think. But it's not just that, it's also his description of how each race works and like how Commorragh works. And we're going to talk a lot more about that later because Commorragh. But I think you and I both said at the beginning before we started podcasting, well done, Mike Brooks. You actually made me enjoy the Drukhari.
Yep.
And not a single Drukhari like Silent Hunters did, where that guy was just kind of fun. Like, you actually made me enjoy a book about the Drukhari, which stars a Drukhari.
Right. Multiple Drukhari. And it all made sense. And I don't know. It's like, as much as I like Josh Reynolds, I did not like how he did the Drukhari. And I think the only problem with Josh Reynolds is like, I think he enjoyed writing about the twisted and evil, like a little too much. Like what Fabius Bile. And then when he brought in the Drukhari and his Lucas the Trickster novel. It's like, I get this stuff fascinates you. You can do all this weird and twisted stuff, but you lean into it really, really heavily too. And I felt this wasn't as ham-fisted, I guess.
Yeah, and I'll actually agree with you on that, because I also drew comparisons to like Sliskus. And Sliskus, there was almost and again, I know I make a lot of Grey Gardens references and bored rich people references with the Drukhari, which is still apt even in this book, right? They're constantly scheming and conniving and trying to one-up one another. And like Deira talks about that a lot, where she's just like, I mean, obviously we're all going to stab each other in the back. But it wasn't just the twistedness of it. He kept the bored rich people, but actually made it somewhat scary and threatening. I felt kind of like Sliskus and those guys. They were more like the bored rich people who are on their yachts, and who cares? Like, we're kind of silly even. Like, our bored richdom is actually kind of silly. This was very serious, and you get the impression that life in Commorragh is miserable, because everybody is just scheming at all times. But there's also, these are still serious people who are a serious danger.
Who are seriously afraid of death.
Yes, that, I think we got to see a lot of that in Silent Hunters as well.
Right.
But this one definitely dove into the whole, we're terrified of this.
Well, Deira even said it herself. She's like, when we're not plotting, stabbing one another in the back, we're hiding in our webways, avoiding the look of she who thirsts.
Right. And that was, I thought, so we'll talk more about this in a second, but for me, like, for the part that stood out to me, it was chapter 19 in its entirety. This is when Deira and Ufthak are talking when he's captured.
Yes. Yep.
Listening to those two characters lay each other bare was very interesting, and realizing that they understood how the other person worked, how they worked was wonderful. And I thought Mike Brooks, and that was a good example of the author kind of talking through the two races to be like, okay, here's my take on how these two interact. But again, it felt natural and it felt right that these two characters would have this little dialogue, and quite frankly, it was lovely.
Like, my favorite line from that whole thing is when he was like, you guys don't even enjoy fighting. And she's like, we're very good fighters. Like, no, you like killing. You don't like fighting. Like, very apt, because they like to be on the winning side. If they're not winning, it's not fun anymore, and they leave.
Right. And they're also going after it for a different reason. Like, the killing is part of the torture and the misery and their survival. It's almost like the difference between just like eating because you're hungry and you're like mindlessly eating stuff around your house, right? And actually enjoying a meal. It was that I really enjoyed that. And then, of course, I think we have to talk about the beaky scene too, because that scene was just wonderful.
Oh my God. I mean, the fact that he was just like, hey, why don't we team up here? And he's like, oh, I guess never mind. And he just throws him into the crowd. That's amazing.
And they still essentially end up teaming up, because the beaky is like, oh, cool, I'll kill these guys too. I don't care. I'm not happy. It's all Xenos. That scene, that was also like just beautifully written, fun. I think when I initially heard about this book and they were like, oh, it's an orc trapped in Commorragh in the pits. So it's like, oh man, God, I hope there's some really fun gladiatorial stuff. And there was. I got what I came out of 10 out of 10 book of the year. So let's talk about the obvious. Ufthak is back. What do you make of his continued life's journey?
I mean, I'm liking watching him go through, being a war boss, and now he's just like, I'm going to go after the mech lord. I was like, whoa, so you're serious? And, just talk about like how much bigger he's gotten. Like, even when the doc injected him with that growth, basically he's growth hormone, to have steroids to help him, cleanse of the poisons that he had, and it just made him get bigger, which of course makes the brain get bigger. It's kind of something that we see in the orc lore, right? The bigger they get, not only are they stronger and scarier, but they're stronger and scarier because they get so smart. Like the whole thing with, Ghazghkull Thraka, he could speak in perfect High Gothic because he had lived so long. Yes,
Right.
and he was able to speak perfect, Low Gothic with her.
Well, yes. And I thought that was the fact that he knew to translate into Humie, that he was like, oh, I need to be able to talk to these people. Let me translate into Humie. And then they obviously, because they understand Gothic, they switch into that. And they're like, and I do like that, especially with Deira, she's like, ew, the Monkey tongue. But she knows. And again, that you're right. There's nothing worse than a big orc. A strong orc is a smart orc. And I do find this continued deep dive into how much they do actually start to understand the universe. Like I like when he's talking with Deira and he's like, are you the boss? And she's like, yes, of course. And he's like, of everyone? Oh, no. And he's like, yeah, me either. But I want to be. Like, it again, the way that they start to understand things and the way that he figures out the portals and the way that he just starts to... They're still orcs, though. And I did like that Mike Brooks resisted the urge to, like, make him Shakespearean or something like that, where he's like, oh, no, now I'm a tactical genius. No, he's still bored by the webway. He still thinks this whole place is weird and kind of boring because there's no demons or anything to kill him. And, like, it's kind of boring, really. I liked that idea that he's still an orc, but he's thinking way more than I think anyone would be comfortable with an orc thinking.
Right.
And again, just the way that they understand without fully, I guess, know, but not understand really. They can kind of start to recognize and put together patterns, but like he doesn't understand really why the Drukhari are afraid of death. He just knows that they are. I mean, if he were to really start to be like, oh yeah, she who thirsts. Oh, right, because of the party that you guys had 10,000 years ago. Right. The jazz music stopped. Then I would be like, But again, it's just a smart orc.
I mean, but they're only as smart as they're looking for like their next fight. Like I really liked how he just described what the orcs' purpose is. They're literally, what you talked about before, how they're literally just looking for the next big fight. Because like if we're not fighting someone else, we're fighting one another. So they always have to find, or they need you guys. He said, because the only way we can get better and get bigger and grow is by fighting. Which is when she gets the idea of, well, I'm just gonna have to rot in the cell, which is actually a really good idea. That would have been interesting to Unfortunately, the people must be entertained.
Right. Before we transition to that, because I have a lot to say there about how wonderful that scene was. But I think one thing that you touched on earlier that I want to say too, that I really like, I like that we're getting to see, literally and figuratively, Ufthak's growth. Right? We get to see him in Brutal Cunning, and now getting to see him in this book. I'm really like, I didn't ever think I would say that I was invested in an orcish character, but I'm invested in this character now, emotionally invested. Not just because he's funny, but it's fascinating to watch. And again, like if you go back, like I actually picked up Brutal Cunning and went back through some of like the initial chapters in there. It's the same character, but also different. Like there is actual growth here mentally, not just physically. And I think that is an interesting concept within the 40k universe. I think we needed another trilogy, because War Boss kind of is very loosely tied, and we'll talk.
It's connected just because of Snaggy. That's it.
And we'll talk a lot about Snaggy because poor Snaggy. But I like the idea that now we're going to essentially have potentially a trilogy about an orcish character that's going to be like up there with like the Fabulous Bill series or the Uriel Ventress series of look at how this guy grows. I mean, eventually it's not like he's going to take over Thraka, right? But like, is eventually he going to get up to that place where Thraka even has to be like, who is this git?
Right.
I don't know. So let's talk a little bit about what you were talking about. So, because Orks and Drukhari, as soon as I remember seeing the book, they announced it like, oh, that's an odd pairing. What did you make of it?
So one thing I really enjoyed was the orcs, their how they would differentiate between the scrawnies and the spikies. talk about how they both would flip around a lot, but spikies have a tendency just to be a lot more stabby. There was a lot in there that was pretty dang funny. Just their interactions, how they would fight, how they'd get mad at them because they'd always leave when they're not winning.
I did like when he called Deira out for that, when he's like, yeah, you guys kind of skip away, and she's like, rude. Like, she doesn't like being described that flippantly.
But when he points to her brother in the ring, he was like, you cut off my hand, and then I dropped a truck on you. And he starts laughing about that. That's one of, I think, one of my favorite comments he makes in the whole book is when he was summoning, he was summoning his snaz hammer, like Thor summoning Mjolnir, right? And it appeared behind him and inside somebody, so he exploded. Everyone's laughing. He's like, well, if you're going to die, at least make it funny. Okay. Right. And she's just like, you're going to die. He's like, of course I am. Just a matter of like, do I die well?
Right. And I think that's one thing. Like he does, as you're right, like in chapter 19, he especially said, because this was like my favorite whole part of the book here. I do like that when he says, he's like, you guys don't enjoy fighting, but it really, the juxtaposition between a race that is nothing but joy, violent joy, but just nothing but joy. Like we've always joked, right? The orcs are living their best lives. And you get to see that even in here.
Yep.
Like they're in Commorragh and they're still living their best lives. But then you could just juxtapose that with the Drukhari, who they have a weird, twisted sense of amusement, but it's not actual happiness and joy.
No.
Right? As we get to see with their children.
There's no happiness and joy there.
There is no happiness and joy. There's just a satisfaction and this kind of perverse love of suffering, but it's not living, really. And it's definitely not like the orcs. The orcs are just having a great time. And I absolutely love when he describes, he's like, no. You don't enjoy fighting like we do. We enjoy the scrap of it. Mm-hmm. You enjoy the suffering portion of it. And I liked that. But then Mike Brooks also shows it to us, right? And we do see that these people are just, God, they're not living their best lives. I would actually argue that in some ways they have it worse than like imperial peasants or like imperial menials, as it would be, because their lives are awful.
Think about the Drukhari is what they would say compared to like imperial peasants. Is that they'd say, well, we're free. The thing is, you guys are under the illusion of being free. That's the difference.
Yes. And what line is it? I'm trying to think what page it is in chapter 19. Oh yeah, it's page 165. It's when she like when he talks about how they don't fear death. And she's just like, oh, and she has a little bit of an existential crisis there. And when she says that a life in which she could just live. Like and I understand that like in some metaphysical way, like we could get really deep here and have stoner thoughts and talk about how we all are pretty much just trying to stave off the grave, right? Mm-hmm. They really are trying to stave off the grave. That is their whole life is, I don't want to die because I'm terrified of she who thirsts. And I'm not saying that's not necessarily justified. Although who birthed she who thirsts?
Right.
Turn that out there.
Actually, I think it's like on that line is when she's yelling, do you know why you fight? And he goes, yeah. Do you know why you do? She's like, what? Like, yeah. He's like, we fight because we're supposed to. And this is what we do. And it makes us bigger and better.
I like, though, that like the haughty, arrogant elves who are ancient, right? They've been around for forever. And I think before that conversation, Deira probably thought she knew exactly who she was and where she was in life. And it's the fact that it's the orc who actually makes her be like, I'm sorry, what? Like, you can tell, and I actually kind of think that a little bit about the Drukhari in general, that they don't really take a step back and be like, oh, what is this life that we live?
I mean, but we saw that in Eduardo's Carcaridan's book. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing. Like as soon as, she was able to look at, basically that orb, the abyss, and she saw like what she really was, and she's like, this isn't fun anymore. And,
Yes.
Just kind of went off crying in a way. Not exactly, but in a way. And it's honestly amazing to me. Like, I don't understand the Drukhari. And that, yes, they're thriving off of people's suffering and everything, but you guys are an immortal race. You guys literally don't have to do anything at all. So what are you guys doing?
Just scraping by. And they've found a way to live. And I liked the idea, because they mention it several times in the book about how, well, this is just what we've done for millennia. Well, okay. It reminds me. It sounds so boring. If anyone's ever seen, I think it's also in the book, but if you've ever seen the movie The Last Unicorn, there's a really great scene where Molly Grew is talking to King Haggard, and she's like, this doesn't make you happy. And he's like, how would you know that? And she's like, just look at you. I feel that way whenever I read about Commorragh. Like, you guys aren't, again, I know we joke about living your best life, but you're not actually living your lives. Look at this place. Mm-hmm. It's awful, especially when you look then at the Eldari. And do I think that the Eldari are living their best lives? No, probably not either, but it's in a different way. Right. Both races are trying to stave off she who thirsts, right, in their own ways. But the Drukhari in particular, they have all this arrogance. And why? Like, as you read through this, especially with all of their politicking and their scheming, and just, again, you're just bored rich people.
Yes.
Dangerous bored rich people. But it's just the debauchery, the level of debauchery, and just, and again, like, even in the gladiatorial pits, like, you don't get the impression that they're like when you go to a football game or a hockey game, right? And you're just like, oh my God, I'm having the best joy in the moment. They're just kind of like, oh, another one.
Right. I mean, it's just, it's all about, it's literal gladiatorial games. I mean, you talk about like bored rich people. So what do you think the Colosseum was? Like, poor people could barely go to that. When the emperors would have like their 2 weeks of festivals and stuff, that was totally bored rich people. And so that's part of the reason why the Roman Empire fell, is because they were doing a lot more celebrating than keeping their empire happy. And they collect, there's just many reasons why, but that is one of them. It was the debauchery that was going on in the Roman Empire. And it's the same thing here. It's like, you guys can only go do this for so long before it collapses. Well, we got to witness one part of it collapse. We got to see the largest and the strongest witch cult in, Port Devar collapse.
Talk a little bit about Commorragh and its politics. We'll jump ahead in a question here, because I think that's a really good dovetail. There's been a lot of business meetings this week. That piece in and of itself, and it's so weird to say this, like, I don't know how, I don't like the Drukhari, but we get to see one of the witch celts fall, and you're like, oh, damn.
Yeah.
But there was kind of like some people like, oh man, that's crazy. The Commorrans, like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Like, I didn't even get the impression that like the wider Commorragh was like, oh no. More like, okay, bored rich people, like, oh, did their yacht sink?
I was like, well, cool, more territory for the rest of us, because we're bored rich people.
Right. Exactly. Everybody immediately is like, ooh, what did they leave? Did they leave it in their stuff? Like, they're all just vultures.
It's like Green Bay when somebody moves out of town. Can we get their season tickets?
Exactly that. Football references. There's and I think, again, this just reminds me how much I hate these characters, because I hate the Drukhari as a race. Just the constant scheming, the constant, oh, I have leverage on you. Oh, do you have leverage? I have leverage on you. Not as good as this other leverage that I have on you. Oh, Jesus, guys, come on. Like, put it aside.
Oh my God. They're like, the Masked Empire from Dragon Age.
Yes.
The game. It constantly the game.
That is the best way to describe it. It is the game. And I know we mentioned Dragon Age a lot in this podcast. It's actually been a hot minute.
It has been a hot minute. Yep.
Dragon Age in this podcast, but it's what it is. It's just the game. And this idea that, and I don't know, maybe it's because of the sadistic nature that they have to give to themselves that they don't really care about anyone or anything. Like, I don't ever get the impression that they genuinely care. Like, even Deira and her brother, I don't get the impression she really cared about him.
The only thing she cared about him was, if somebody else killed him, be like, oh, God dang it, now I have to, like, start a war, and I don't want to do that. That's just kind of messy. Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been inconvenient and a hassle. Because she had her eyes on a different prize, right? And that would have been just been like a distraction from her greater goals. It's crazy to me, and like even we get to see like children and like the youths of Commorragh. I don't even get an impression that they really care about them.
No.
Like you've spawned these oddly not born evil. I actually kind of like the idea that the Drukhari aren't born evil.
Right.
They have to be molded into it.
It's an acquired taste.
It's an acquired taste. Because you kind of get the impression that some of they could have picked up some of those people, thrown them onto a craft world, and they could have just been Eldari.
Yep.
But,
wasn't that the only difference between the Eldari and the Drukhari is the choices?
Pretty much. Yeah. And I like the idea that, because I think like, and I'm not saying that this has always been like, I think my inference from the books in which we've read about them. First off, it is nice to see children because the elves, you very rarely in any type of story see elf children because their race is always in decline. Thank you, Tolkien. They just, why are the elves in decline? Because they are.
Even though they live forever, but,
Exactly. It's just like the dwarves. Why are the dwarves always in decline? Because our Lord and Savior of fantasy said it was so.
So the movie can happen.
Because we need the movie to happen. Exactly. So that was actually kind of nice too. This idea that, no. We're not totally in decline. There are like, we are a functional society. One of the things, like one of the big criticisms of some fantasy games is when you don't get to see kids around. So I actually kind of like that this is a functional society. This, I think, felt like the most lived in version of Commorragh that we've seen for the podcast.
Right.
Oh yeah. There's politics, there's buildings, there's people, like obviously buildings, but you know what I mean? Like it felt like there's districts. There's all kinds of stuff here. I liked that. It didn't just feel like a set piece. Like, oh, it's the Dark City. Anyways, moving on. I liked it. It's an awful place. I do not want to visit.
Well, no. There's like nowhere, though, in this universe I'd want to visit, except for maybe Macragge.
Fair.
Maybe.
Fair.
I don't even want to go to Deira. Nope.
The idea of orcs, though, in Commorragh really did amuse me. So let's talk about our dearest Deira. Were you invested in her scheming and her story? Like, in her motivations? Was she a good... I hesitate to call her an antagonist. She was more of like the...
She's an instigator, not an antagonist.
Right. She is the person who poked the badger just to see what would happen. Mm-hmm. Were you invested in all of her stuff?
Not really. Like, the only thing I was invested, I was like, will you just admit you have feelings for this guy and move on? But that was about it.
That was a nice touch, but also a sad touch. Because again, these people don't live. They don't live. Like... They just don't live, which made me kind of bummed for them. Like, aw. But then there's also just so much. Every interaction she had, like especially whenever she was talking with the homunculus, every interaction she has is scripted,
right.
And like she has to. Okay, well, I'll just pretend that I'm happy about this, or I'll pretend that I'm angry or something. Like everything is crafted, and okay, how do I speak here? What do I do? Again, kind of going with our bored rich person thing, like everything she did, she's evaluating for weakness. She's not worried about it ending up on social media, but she evaluates everything for weakness, and that makes me sad. But she's also an asshole.
It's again, like you said, like millions of times tonight. It's just no way to live for you constantly. I mean, they might as well wear masks at that point. That's why they do in Orlais.
Right. Exactly. And I was kind of invested in it because it was funny and it was interesting, right? Because as soon as you're like, I have a plan, and my plan involves orcs, I'm going to go ahead and suggest you take a step back and maybe rethink this plan. You want to talk about controlling chaos, right? Not like in the evil chaos way, but just like in the true chaos way, anarchy. But I also got the impression that this was one of many schemes and many plans, and this one didn't work, so we'll try something else. It's hard to be invested in it.
I mean, it didn't, but at the same time, it kind of did.
Yeah.
Because the witch cult's gone, the Master Homunculus is dead.
Did anyone shed a single tear for that?
Okay, first of all, he's a homunculus, so no. I don't even like the word homunculus. I don't. But so one thing I did notice in this book is that the Drukhari like their titles, their names for things.
Oh, God, yes, do they? Again, though, they're rich people. It all matters.
I guess it's just like she's like,
he didn't go to a homunculus school for you to not refer to him as a master homunculus.
Well, they talk about, he's the master homunculus who's bringing these types of things with him. I'm like, I don't even know what this stuff means, and I kind of don't care because it's too much, and it probably doesn't even mean anything that important. It's just like, well, I have these things with me, which made me laugh because when she's talking to Ufthak, who's going over like the different weapons, and he's saying the orc words. She's like, well, now you're just making up words. I'm like, well, bitch, I could say the same thing about you. Some of the stuff you guys have.
I actually love that because that's that whole player knowledge, not character knowledge.
Right.
Thing where like he's listing stuff off and we're like, oh yeah, I know what that is. I know what that is. And she's like, now you're just making up words. Like, oh right, you wouldn't know what any of that is. Like you would have no idea what a snazwagon is. We know because we've seen the product line.
I may name my new car the Snazwagon. Next time I get a new car, Snazwagon.
Ooh, I might be getting a new car soon, so I'm going to call it. My current car is called the Echo of Damnation. I'm going to have to call the next one the Snazwagon. It'd be better if it was red. Doesn't matter. Still call it that. It's a great, but yes, I had the similar thought with that, where they go through like all of their stuff, like, oh, well, I bring this and I bring that, and you're like, oh, that's great. Super. Oh, and
it's just like a potluck dinner.
Right. Exactly. Well, I bring a witch cult. Oh, that's nice. We'll kill them all. The homunculus in general, I know we've talked about this before, but the homunculus in general, just no. Just no. Every time one of them floats in, I'm like, oh, not you. Immediately not you. They're just gross.
Yes.
They're just gross. And it touches into that Slanesh thing that I just don't like. People being used as a harp. And
yeah.
And I will admit, there were a few things I had to look up in this book because I was like, what is that again? Their name just totally slipped my mind too. It's been a really long week already. The elite warriors, when they find out, she finds out early in the book that she killed one and they have to get rid of the armor and
yeah. I don't remember.
Yes. Oh, I'm so embarrassed I can't think of the name right now. But that was one that I was like, what are those guys again? And then I pulled them up and I was like, oh, that's your idea of super fancy, is it? It's fine. There were a few things with the Eldari because I'm more versed in the orcs because I like the orcs better. So they would mention words. Like, what is that? Oh, right. That's what that is.
I just stopped caring after a while. I was like, what?
Fair.
You know what? It's just made up words at this point for different factions, different levels. I don't care.
Well, and they're just, again, because they're bored rich people, they're so into their titles. And just their hierarchy and their little... And the funny thing about it is that it's so big, it somehow becomes little and petty. Speaking of little, where does Snaggy go from here?
And that dude cannot get a break.
I was really, like, when he took the L again, I was like, oh, poor little grot.
Yeah, but I don't want him to kill Ufthak, so if it has to come down between him and Ufthak, I'm sorry. No Snaggy. I find it funny how he, was trying to rile up the Grots, and then anything he did, he's like, you guys are so dumb because this, and this. It was like, wow, you're a genius. And Ufthak's like, well, how did you guys know to come this way? He's like, because Snaggy riled up all the Grots. It was amazing. And he's like, huh. Like,
that ain't good.
It helped me, but might need to keep an eye on this one. He starts, thinking a little too much for a Grot.
Right. And he said from the beginning, there was just something about Snaggy he didn't like. Just, he couldn't put his finger on it, right? He's like, I just don't like this one. So I know that at the end of War Boss, it was like, oh, there's Ufthak. That's cool. Why bring Snaggy into this book?
I don't know, because we know he was with Ufthak after the end of War Boss. That's one guy I could think of, and it just kind of brought a different element in with the Grots. Does that
right? It does add a sense of like another, just not an antagonistic thing, but just like another point of conflict, right? The Grots.
Well, and I think we've been seeing like a big rise of the Grots lately since we keep having Dagobah books every year. So maybe there is going to be a Grot revolution. It's not going to go anywhere, but it's kind of fun to see them try.
Well, and we've always said that the Greenskins, not just the Orks, but the Greenskins are their own worst enemies in some way, right? Mm-hmm. And so I do see this this odd power dynamic of Ufthak going after this big prize, but then he's got Snaggy on his heels. And I'm with you. Like, I love Snaggy. I like the Grots. I find them funny. I find their logic, their series of logic, every bit as interesting and amusing as the Orks. Mm-hmm. And their own little politics that they have.
Yeah.
Very humorous. But if it has to come down to between him and Ufthak, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. It's Ufthak.
It is.
He's just a more better character. And he has a squig named Princess.
So it actually comes when he calls for it.
The way that Mike Brooks, that's a part that I forgot to mention, stands out to me. The way he describes this creature. Like when he talks about them on the in the wagon and they get it going super fast and Princess is clamped onto one like the roll bars basically. Yeah. It's so cinematic and you can just picture this stupid little squig, mm-hmm. right? And the way he talks about it bouncing around. Just I need more Princess in my life. Just fucking Princess. Love Princess. But Snaggy is, I think it's going to be an interesting, is it eventually going to come down to if Ufthak's going to have to deal with this? Are you right? Is this going to be one of those things where it's becoming like, okay, so the Orks, we've got Orks that are getting smarter. Mm-hmm. We have Orks that are starting to mobilize a little bit, but they just have these damn Grots that they have to deal with.
Makes me wonder if Snaggy's going to be like the next, the Red Gobbo.
That would actually be really funny. Mm-hmm. I would actually really like that. I think it would be a nice payoff for him to lead to the glorious revolution. Mm-hmm. I think that would be a really nice payoff for his character.
Because if he ever did come across the current Red Gobbo, he wouldn't put up with that for very long. He'd be like, no, this is my idea. Like, we can't have Red Gobbo coming in and taking this over.
Was that in the last Red Gobbo book we read, or the one before that?
I think it's in the last one we find out they're the Dread Pirate Roberts, basically.
Exactly, and because the one is like, no, these are my ideas, and Red Gobbo's like, sure, until the yes, actually it is. I think that's always a fun thing, and I think it would actually be kind of cool because to your point, like the Red Gobbo's fun, and I love it, and we get one every Christmas now, and that's just kind of fun.
Yeah.
I would like to see it become narratively relevant and not just like this little fun dalliance that we get at Christmas.
I mean, I think we're seeing definitely an Ork uprising. Like, is Gazgul Thraka coming back? Now we have Ufthak Blackhawk, who is, taken over. I mean, kind of like how he killed the Mech Lord because, my God, did not see that coming.
The Black Cannon.
Right. My God. It was so funny though. So funny.
Again, when it's orc books and the orcs are the protagonists,
Right.
the protagonists, their sheer love of violence and destruction is just funny. It is so funny, but you could imagine not finding it so funny if you were a human on the end of that. So where does Ufthak go from here?
Just going to go try to recruit take over more. I mean, he's, this is no longer the tech walk. It's his own, and just going to go find some more things to go smash. That's what they do, right? They don't stay in one place for very long. They got more things to smash.
So, in a battle between him...
Maybe he's going to find some more of those Crimson Fists.
In a battle between him and some, unnamed Space Marine, right? Okay. I have to say that I'm on Ufthak Blackhawk's side, right?
Well, yeah, if I don't care about that chapter.
Right. If it was something...
Some watered-down chapter, whatever.
But if it was him and he, Cato Sicarius, who came up against each other, I would genuinely be sad.
Yeah, I'd have to be on the side of he, Cato Sicarius.
Yes, same. But I would be genuinely sad. Oh, I'm sorry, Ufthak. It's been a really great run.
It's been really great. We're gonna miss ya.
So, as a projection for this series, let's just
my
assume.
God, what if oh my God, what if this becomes a problem? One that Reboot has to deal with.
God, I would kind of low-key love that. Assuming this is a trilogy, do you think the best ending for Ufthak Blackhawk is that he basically gets to go off and join Ghazghkull Thraka, and then we just keep our fingers crossed that he does eventually become so much of a problem that somebody like Reboot is going to have to go deal with him, and he,
Or does he get his own commissar?
Or is the best ending at the end of this series for Ufthak Blackhawk that he just goes out in a hail of gunfire and glory?
He dies in the most macho manner ever. Strapped to a shark with dynamite into a volcano.
Obviously. He'd be laughing the whole way down. Actually, I don't know if he would be laughing at that one because it wouldn't be... he wants to go out in a fight. But, this is one of the things that I keep thinking about is that I love him, and as we've been talking tonight about it being a series where we're invested in this orcish main character, does he have to die for it to really be a series that's about an orc? Or do we have to have more of an amorphous, maybe he's going to go find Thraka? I don't know.
I have a feeling it's going to be the latter. Just kind of give him an open-ended ending.
And then we hope he disappears in somebody else's books. I think so. But I wouldn't be angry if he just had some gloriously terrible death that made him happy.
As long as he's not the one
laughing.
that kills Caiaphas Cain, because that would not be cool.
No, I would not like that at all. I don't want him to kill anyone we care about. Jeez, that goes without saying, Carrie. Don't make it weird.
We already know Cain is dead, so it's a matter of how.
Honestly, Mike Brooks, I know we've said this before, but a joining up of authors, but a Mike Brooks, Sandy Mitchell team up would be, I don't know if the universe could handle that kind of a book.
Especially if it was half of it's told from Caiaphas Cain with Amberley Vale's footnotes and everything, and the other half is told from Ufthak Blackhawk. That'd be really hilarious.
That would be absolutely hilarious. Again, if it switched, so there'd be a Caiaphas Cain chapter written by Sandy Mitchell, and then an Ufthak one written by Mike Brooks. I really, really like what he's doing with the orcs. I think, and honestly, getting into more of a meta commentary, the orcs are just a more compelling is probably not the right word for it, but just I enjoy them way more than the Nids. Right. I enjoy them way more than the Tau.
My God.
I enjoy them more than the Necrons.
I loved his commentary on the Tau. Oh my God, when he actually talks about how they're weak against melee, it's that's awesome. I like to now think that Mike Brooks hangs out in the meme Reddits.
I like knowing that Mike Brooks is a denizen of the internet. I do really like knowing that. Yes, but I think I think for a while there, we've talked about this before, but like Games Workshop and by extension Black Library keeps trying to make something happen, right? The Necrons with getting you some chartreuse. For a while there, it was just Nids and Gene Stealers literally everywhere. I mean, how many books have we read with the Nids and the Gene Stealers? And
too many.
yeah, and I understand they're kind of fun and whatever. Like it's just fodder, and you can have these big dramatic battles and these big dramatic sad books with them. I get it. But then orcs are just, again, because we've seen like with the Catachan books, we've seen from the human perspective where they're just terrifying. I just like the orcs better. Like I get really excited when it's orcs because, again, they're kind of fun, and then when they're not fun, they're scary and they're very compelling. I think they might be my favorite Xenos, and I don't want to see every book with orcs. Eventually, we would get tired of them too, just like we did with the Gene Stealers. Like that poor Imperial Fist book with the librarian,
the one that we never remember.
Yeah, that's the one. I remember like clips of it, but because it was dealing with the Gene Stealers, I've pretty much just memory hold it.
Oh, Fist of the Imperium. That's what it was
called. Yes, I was like, it's fist. It definitely has fist in the name of it. It's definitely a fist word. That one, yeah, like that was another one or like Day of Ascension. I think we enjoyed the book when we read it, but I pretty much have memory hold that book too.
Oh no, see, I think I that's actually probably my only book dealing with the Gene Stealers that I've liked.
And then what was the book? Wasn't there one with the Dark Angels and the Gene Stealers?
It was the Dark Angels and the Tau.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Those War of Secrets. I don't know about Dark Angels and the Gene Stealers though.
Maybe I'm imagining that, but there's just been a lot of Gene Stealer books. I would prefer to see more orc books, especially if they're being written by Mike Brooks. Again, I just love what he's doing with Xenos lore in general, and if the man can make the Drukhari compelling to me,
that's true.
Yeah. And again, there's such a nice, and maybe it's just I like the Drukhari because they're such a good like pairing with the orcs, which I don't know that I would have thought of that, right?
I actually wouldn't mind seeing Ufthak go up against the Necrons next.
I don't know how I feel about that one.
Because I don't like the Necrons, but I think that'd be interesting.
Because we've often talked about how the Necrons are just another flavor of the Drukhari, bored rich people, right? And it really does depend on which authors are writing them, whether or not I like them personally. I did like Eduardo Albert's use of them. In Khazarkan. I really liked that use of them.
I think Mike Brooks would. I think he, especially if we have one with Ufthak, I think that could be a very interesting book.
I think you're right, especially given that... I think
he'd actually make the Necrons humorous, because they can be humorous at times.
Oh, yeah.
Like, oh my god, Robert Rath's book. Holy crap. It's like probably one of the only like Necron books I really liked.
Okay, wait a minute. Walk down this little path with me. What if Ufthak Blackhawk gets picked up by Trazyn?
Oh my gosh. Trazyn would totally keep him in his museum.
So that one of my favorite scenes in the Fall of Cadia is, of course, when Trazyn has his gamesmen hunting things. Right. Those whole things are great and awesome. And I would like to see him. Now that you're talking about this is where I want this to go. I want Ufthak Blackhawk to have to battle the Necrons, and then all of a sudden Trazyn shows up and just yoink man. Trazyn is the yoink man.
He is the yoinker.
The universe. He also boop. The yoink man is doing God's work on Instagram or whatever social media platform you digest his content from. I think I'm looking forward to. I think the other thing that I really like about these books is that they're not too soon, too often.
Right.
I do like the pacing between them, and they are just kind of a nice amuse-bouche. Really nice.
Yeah.
Nice little happy meal to digest. I really liked this one. I'm really glad we read this one. I know that we were really excited for it. I wish it would have had a collector's edition.
I'm actually surprised it didn't, but I mean...
Same. Especially given that they put one out for Big Dakka. Sorry, not to Big Dakka. Brutal Cunnin.
Oh,
They put one out for Brutal Cunnin, but not to Big Dakka.
And for Gaskell Thraka. Well, maybe that one didn't sell well, so I don't know.
Maybe they're like, why sell it once when we could sell it twice?
Yeah, it's true.
I would actually buy a box set of these someday. Maybe they'll do a nice big box set of the three of them.
I bet they will. I mean, they keep reprinting old box sets of stuff, so never know.
Yeah. Actually, well, the other one that I'm surprised didn't have a limited edition is actually our next book, given that it's been so long since we've checked in with the Dark Angels for our next book. Lazarus, and I have a confession to make right now. I really struggle with this word. Lazarus. Enmity's Edge. It always comes out Emity.
Emity.
Yeah, I struggle with the nasal consonants. Enmity's Edge, new author, Dark Angels. I actually love the artwork on the back with their big big helms.
I mean, it's just like, wow, who's more ridiculous, you guys or the Night Lords?
Or like, seriously, how do you walk through doorways?
Especially some of the Night Lords ones.
It's a lot of.
What always cracks me up about the Night Lords, like the figures that you can paint, there's the different helmets, and they have it like, going straight out like a goalpost, and then the ones that look going straight up like they're constantly surprised. It's like you can it's like you can hear the Solid Snake. I
was just about to say the Metal Gear Solid sound every time I see them. Yeah. Yes, exactly that. Or they just kind of look like they have on Mickey Mouse ears.
That too.
Or like a Bullwinkle hat, maybe? I don't know. I don't like the way those look either. I have like, it's also like the Thousand Suns with their giant thing, and then also the World Eaters with their giant like goalposts coming up.
Then I guess you got to wonder about the Ultramarines with their laurels.
Well, but the laurels, okay. The laurels, like, they usually describe them as being like almost like a halo, or like right here, like it's close. They looked at everybody else's helmets and were like, but how do you use a door?
Ultramarines
are practical.
Well, I mean, because Reboot even talks about how the laurel on his armor of fate, how it's actually hard for him to turn all the way around and see behind him because of it. Like, yeah, I kind of wondered about that because you already have a laurel on your head, like a literal laurel, and then you have your halo laurel. It's that one, the one he's just like, I can't turn my head.
I can't. Yeah. Yeah. It's still the least offensive, though, of like you would think that with all of that stuff up there that be a lot of that, or like backward. Try putting something on your head sometime. See how well that like works. Like balance a laundry basket up there and be like, oh yeah, that would work. Totally. That's what we need is more Space Marines like that.
With laundry baskets on their head.
I mean, why not at this point, right? But I think going from the super fun-loving orcs to nobody's really having fun in the Dark Angels chapter. I'm excited.
Especially not on the rock.
I'm excited, but I do feel the caveat needs to be made here. I see nary a word about the lion.
Oh, I don't think the lion's going to be mentioned in here at all. Jesus. And you know what? I'm glad that I'm leaning that way, because then if he does get mentioned, that's a lovely surprise, and I'll be happy.
You know what? It'll be a surprise and delight feature.
Exactly. And now
from a new author.
Now I can't get disappointed if he's not there, because I don't expect him to be in there.
You know what? I hadn't looked at it that way.
I'm totally waiting for Lion Son of the Forest to be an episode, to be the season finale of Dallas, that it was all a dream.
I will lose my shit. That was just him still dreaming. He hasn't actually come back. We've already established that he's all in a dream world.
Duh.
Yeah, Lazarus at the end of this book is going to hear a noise, and he's going to go like walk through this ship, and he's going to see Bobby Ewing in the shower. Exactly that.
Or he's going to go down to the bottom of the rock where the Watchers have the lion and be like, see, he's still here.
Is he down there? Okay, cool. We're good. We're good. He's still down there, guys. He's dreaming about being out. His eyes are moving a lot.
Look at that REM sleep, guys.
The lion is sleeping. He took his melatonin. Very excited for it. New author, new book.
Yep.
Anything else to say about that one, Carrie?
Yeah, no. I mean, it's the last new book for a little while. I mean, no, we'll see.
Yeah, we so as always, this would be my one request out to everybody. It's a little bit of a homework assignment. So obviously, like Lord of the Night. Yeah, not Lord of Night, Lord of the Night.
Lord of the Night.
He's not Lord of Dance. Just republished, and we'll be reading that. We have the other 3 series that we're still moving through, the older ones, but savvy viewers may notice that we're coming on to the 3rd book of the Night Lord series. So if you have any other recommendations
our next
for the
book
Wayback Machine.
But our next book's the 2nd book of the Salamanders. So
Right. So, but we're going to be coming up on our 3rd books of all of those series. So,
2 of what's his name? Yark.
True. That's true. But then we'll be done with that one.
Yep.
So the point still stands is that we're going to need some books from the Wayback Machine. So,
dear God, I can't. This is ridiculous. I'm kind of just like, it was one thing when it was the pandemic. I understood. Right. Totally understood. I don't know what's going on right now. And the only thing I can think of is that they don't know what's going on either. And they're going through a little crisis trying to figure out where they're trying to go, because I've personally noticed from my emails and everything, and from the last several new releases, they're leaning very heavy into Age of Sigmar.
Yes, I have noticed that as well. I feel like every promotional email from Warhammer has been Age of Sigmar. And this is the Warhammer 40k book club, not the AOS book club. Although,
or the Black Library book club. We're not the Black Library book club.
Yeah. I'll be real honest and say, like, we're going to come to a point where it's probably going to be like the Siege of Terra or something. I have no idea, but we're going to have to like start branching out, because I'm not doing Age of Sigmar. And more importantly, it does seem to be a lot of their focus. Like, I feel like maybe, and I know we've kind of talked about this and this is totally off topic, but I feel as though they were like, oh, the lion is back. And they released the lion and he's back and we have a book for it. And then they were like, now what? And people were like, I don't know.
I guess we got the next Dawn of Fire book supposed to be coming out soon.
There's
that.
It was involuntary. One of the things that I've talked about for people who are Song of Ice and Fire fans, one of the things that George R.R. Martin did was, instead of setting the book series like 5 years ahead like he wanted to, he decided to detail everything after the first 3 books. So like Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons is detailing everything that's happening. And now I think he's kind of written himself into a corner, because he can't just be like, oh, and this happened 2 years ago, and everyone goes, oh yeah, I remember when that happens. I think the Black Library, very similarly, with releasing the lion and bringing him back, I think now they're like, oh man, but we're not ready to progress the story. What do we do now? And so they've switched to Age of Sigmar, because there's just more stuff to be doing on over there, it looks like. That's my, like, personal, not knowing really anything about Age of Sigmar, assessment of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's disappointing.
Well, I could also, what about the Horus Heresy character series? You haven't had anything from that in a while.
That's a good point. Wait a minute. The Graham McNeil one never came out either.
No, it never did. The one that, so I think the last one that came out was Sigismund, right? Was that right?
Yeah. Yes, that is right.
Yeah, there it is. Sigismund. Yeah, up there. Yeah, so,
What about that book too? So like, I was like, oh, the last book that came out was the Gav Thorpe one about the guy.
Luther?
The Dark Angels guy. Yeah, Luther. Thank you. Again, it's been a long week. I loved Luther, but I was like, oh, that's the last one that came out, and
no,
because Cypher was not the character series. I mean, that was a character series, but it wasn't the same thing,
right?
And Cypher was last year, at the beginning of the year. When, gosh, now I'm going back through the site to figure out when we did read the Sigismund book. Oh no, that's Helbrecht. That's another one. Like that character series too. They're like, hey, books about famous characters.
Yeah, like the last one, but
at
that
some
was,
point.
was Helbrecht, right? For that one.
Sigismund came out May 6th, 2022.
All right.
It's been a spell. It's been a spell.
Has been a spell.
It's so weird. Are they like abandoning the Black Library portion of it? Are they just switching the focus totally to Age of Sigmar because that's where the money is right now?
That's weird because I mean, not that I have some like inside line to Graham McNeil, but when he talked about that he was writing one of those books, it sounded like it was a done deal. Like he'd already written it because he said his blue book, because they're all colors. Very curious who that could have been.
Or where it is.
Right.
There's been a few books like that. I feel like they've teased a few things over the years, and then it's just like, again, have they just switched entirely to Age of Sigmar because that's the growth market right now? The answer to that could be yes. Maybe because they don't know what they're doing with the 40k side of it yet. Again, I don't know. It's just well,
what do we know is coming out this year? We got Dawn of Fire, and what is the 5th Ahriman book coming out this year?
Yes. Where was that? They just did an article. I know that everybody woke up this morning and they were like, we want to watch Jen run through it was the Black Library celebration. Right? We knew that Big Dakka was coming out. There's a couple of things coming out in the there it is. The Black Library celebration. Oh, that was just what was coming up. Big Dakka, the Ahriman book. Oh, no. What's her face has there's going to be that Morven Val book written by the lady who wrote the Ursula Creed book.
Jude Reed.
Again, did I mention? Huh?
Dr. Jude Reed.
Jude Reed. It's been about a week, y'all. We know that that's coming out. Where was the other? They had that. They always do the post where they're just like, they always do the post where they're like, here's all the books and the reveals. And I feel like they don't have that one. Right now, I'm not finding it, at least on the site right now off the top of my head. But that's the only other like really big book that I can remember. And yeah, that's not really inspiring me with hope. I don't know what to say there. Gosh dang it. The second we get off of this call, I'm going to be like, oh, there was the complete and total list. Doesn't matter. Anyways, I know as you said, the Hand of Abaddon by Nick Kime, I think, is coming out soon.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that the Dawn of Fire book?
Yeah. And then there's the last one after that until they decide to keep belaboring this point.
Is that one going to be the Ring of Bucharest?
Can't even. I literally can't even with that. I just can't even. Gosh dang it. I have to see this one. But we can always put that up later. But they had like all of these. They had all of these reveals that I was like, oh, that's actually kind of cool. And then nothing really after that, I feel like. Lord of Night, of course, they revealed. This was in there. I remember. It's not very exciting right now, you guys. We need more stuff. We'll keep reading and we'll find stuff. There's always more stuff to read. But, yeah. You want to take us out, Carrie?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that was kind of a downer. But anyway.
That was a downer.
It's not our fault. It's Games Workshop's fault. But you've listened to the Warhammer 40k Book Club episode regarding The Big Dakka by Mike Brooks. Be sure to join us next time for Lazarus Enmity's Edge by Gary Kloster. We are an unofficial book club and not affiliated with the Black Library or any of its affiliates. You can find both the vidcast and podcast on our website, WH40kbookclub.com. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe, give a review, and all those things to the vidcast on YouTube or the podcast literally anywhere you get podcasts. Come join our Discord. We have fun discussions. People like to share what they're painting. I'm not one of them, but I like looking at the stuff. It's pretty. I'm envious. It's awesome. And we also have like we have this one channel for meme depositing. These people find some really great stuff. I have not been on Reddit in a while to look for stuff, but we found some really funny stuff on there. But in addition to that, our site also has articles about our adventures in reading other Warhammer 40k books and short stories outside the book club books and the Warhammer Plus animation. All of that fun stuff. Jen has a new review up there right now for the latest Broken Lance. I'm struggling with Burden of Loyalty and the Horus Heresy. And I mean, struggling. These short story anthologies are going to be the death of me with this series, I swear to God. But either way, please come, stay a while, and read for McClag. Wow. That just shows like I'm done for the night. Totally done.
That's fair.
Words are hard now.
Words are hard.
They are. And apparently they're hard for Games Workshop. That's why they're not putting out anything new. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Yes, the beacon is lit.